about, what we're here to talk about, is classic cars, and more importantly, classic cars that are missing their sort of classic status and exemption that comes with them.
Yeah, so this is our lead story in this week's issue, and this is all to do with historic vehicle status. When your classic car reaches the grand old age of 40 years old, many of you will probably already be aware that you are entitled to put it on historic vehicle status with the DVLA, which means that while you still tax your car every year, you don't have to pay for it. Which saves many hundreds of pounds a year. Certainly, I'm looking forward to doing that with my RX-5 and the Aventus when they get there. And the reason why it's so important is because it helps keep these cars on the road, stops them from either being disappearing off and being broken up for spares, or languishing on people's drivers, encourages them to use them and to contribute to events and all those wonderful specialists who keep our sort of classic car hobby moving. But the latest figures that we've managed to obtain reveal that actually there are more than 100,000 cars that are old enough to have that status but still have never been put on it. So it's something that, if you have a car that's over 40 years old, you've got to be able to go onto the DVLA's website, get the relevant details, and actually register your car for that status. It doesn't happen automatically. So there are more than 100,000 vehicle cars specifically which aren't getting that, and that means that the DVLA is still actually raking in many millions of pounds a year in vehicle excise duty revenue, which they, strictly speaking, don't need because it's an exempt class in terms of payments.
Yeah, a very interesting one. And do we know, possibly an interesting question that's just fired off in my brain, what's the oldest car that's sort of forgotten to be exempted, or do we not have that specific a detail?
So this is all to do with it. It's a very specific, it's a very general, piece of information. So it's any vehicle that is classed as private light goods, which is what cars are. If you're paying for a car, it will be PLG, private light goods, and it's what we've asked for is those manufactured before a certain date, which is the cut-off point for taking your vehicle over to historic vehicle status. So what the DVLA won't give you necessarily is the all of the individual details, but I would love to know if there are any pre-war cars out there or veterans who are still paying for their vehicle excise duty.
It'd be an interesting one to find out if someone's still got sort of an old Austin A30 or something even older still, that they're still sort of heading off to file the road tax for each year, which would be a bit of an annoyance because it's something they wouldn't have to do, obviously, if we pointed out.
Yeah, it's interesting because certainly for anyone who sort of followed the ups and downs of rolling tax exemption, it always used to be, but when it was introduced originally back in the 90s, it was 25 years. And actually, with the way that cars have evolved over time, I think a lot of cars that are sort of 20, just over 25 years old, including my car at home, are still in use as daily drivers because the build quality is better. If you think about it, in 1994, a 25-year-old car would have been something like a Hillman Avenger or something, which very few people would have still been using as daily drivers back then because most of them would have rusted away. But
Yeah,
the
there's
build quality is
survivorship
better
bias.
now. Yeah.
Mm. James, you got anything on this one? I know you sort of put together a bit of the news section, but this was a story that David wrote.
I just think it's really important because it helps a lot of cars survive, doesn't it? Because if you're just in the banger status, you're going to slip through the net and you're going to, more cars are going to disappear off the road. Whereas if it's actually, a classic, bona fide classic, there's more reasons to keep it. You've got, makes more financial sense, isn't it, to keep something on the road that's actually going to be worth something in the future as a classic rather than just a slightly older car at the moment.
Yeah, and worth mentioning too as well. It's not just your annual vehicle excise duty that you'd be missing out on as well. With a lot of towns and cities across the country that are rolling out clean air zones, they will usually use the historic vehicles tax class as their basis for exempting you from those charges. So there's a very real chance. I mean, it's done, town by town and city by city at the moment. But there's a very real chance that if you drive into Portsmouth or London or somewhere like that, if you haven't got your car in historic status, you may well get a bill through for going into a clean air emission zone as well. So that's another benefit for exempting your classic too.
Yeah, Bath Bristol, Birmingham, quite a lot of major conurbations have got those these days. And I think it goes beyond just the financial aspect of this as well. It's also that sort of possibly adds to the mindset of it, of then sort of you have a certified classic, and it encourages you out into the classic sphere with sort of the clubs and taking part in events and taking part in the things that really aid to preservation of not just your vehicles, but other vehicles that sort of form part of the hobby as well. So it's sort of a almost the rite of passage paperwork for part of the community in a sense.
And it's interesting as well that this 40-year roll-off, obviously, which was introduced on a rolling basis about a decade or so ago, that is the status that the Treasury recognises as the when a car, is eligible for these concessions. But actually, the Federation of British Historic Vehicle Clubs and FIVA, which is the big international organisation which looks after classics, they both recognise historic vehicles at the age of 30 onwards. And actually, it's been a long-standing position that they would eventually like it to be that when your car reaches 30 years old, it gets those sort of concessions on tax and MOT and emission zones as well. And that would make a really big difference to helping to preserve those sort of slightly younger cars as well.
I think having that broader 30-year sort of acceptance would be a lot more important when it comes to sort of securing a lot more younger classics into this.